done before. He's not out of control. He is totally in control of those sessions.
Though Brian's idiosyncrasies fast became a feature of the studio work. The modular recording style and unorthodox compositional turns mystified many of the session players and, often accompanied by his entourage, Brian encouraged a mood of levity and experimentation.
This was his baby, and we were just working little parts. Ba-doom-doom, ba-doo-dee, ba-doom-dee, ba-doo-dee. These are things that he wanted done, and we were doing them. And then he'd say, thanks, that's enough. In other words, he heard something at home, he drove to the studio, he wanted that 3, 4, 6, 8 bars. He wanted to hear it. Once he heard it, okay, I'm going. That's enough. And then he'd go home, I guess, and work on whatever else he was working on. For us, it was amazing. We never saw this with other producers or directors. They said, here's the song, we played it. With Brian, he'd say, here's the intro.
Ending, take 3.
With the Spile album, that was cut in pieces, you know. And so I thought, well, that's strange. But, you know, you have to remember, when we do film scores, we cut film scores in pieces, too. When you go to a film score day, you might do the middle part first, and then the ending next, and then the theme of the song. You jump around with different pieces of a film score. And so I just thought that that's the way he's thinking these days, you know, to cut record dates. You accept the way he is, because he was a fine writer, you know, and every time he cut something, it was a big smash hit, so you trust him.
Okay, one more. That's going to be very good, okay? Don't worry about how it falls apart at the end of the verse. That's generally what it's supposed to do. Hey, but don't worry about it, Carol. You mustn't. You mustn't worry. You mustn't. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I'm kind of the worry wart of the studio musicians, right? Being a woman, you know, yeah, I'm gonna worry about you kids, yeah.
It was just parties. These were all parties, you know, with the firemen's hats and all of the things that the guys were doing. I don't think anybody was taking anything serious.
He brought in some firemen's helmets, and so somebody started a fire in a waste paper basket or some.
There was a helper assistant guy called Brother Julius with a big bucket, put wood in it, light it, and he brought it into the studio while they were playing. Fire, you know, that Miss O'Leary scout.
But again, the Beach Boys were on tour, and they came home and they found these songs that he wanted them to sing that bore absolutely no resemblance to anything that seemed like, you know, normal life. Heroes and Villains and Van Dyke Parks wrote these songs that were just oblique, to say the least. The famous line that caused Mike Love to blow his top was in the song Evanescence, which is a sort of a impressionistic portrait of the wide open frontier and the procession of pioneers moving further west, and describing this vision of a worker on the railroad, a Chinese worker who sees a bird fly up in the air looking down at him, and suddenly you're seeing the world through the bird's eyes, as he's saying over and over, the crow flies uncover the cornfield. Mike Love was like, what the hell is this? Like, what could this possibly mean?
There's a very famous story about Mike Love coming in the studio and sort of point-blanking Van Dyke Parks as to what the lyrics meant.
I wasn't close enough to the other guys. I was in a position of defending my lyrics. It went from Ding Woody Pearl, Hang Ten. I mean, I didn't know that language, to like columnated ruins domino. Mike Love said to me one day, he said, explain this. Over and over, the crow cries, uncover the cornfield. And it was an American Gothic trip that Brian and I were working on. I said, I don't know what these lyrics are all about. They're unimportant, throw them away. And so they did.
You know, Mike wanted to have some kind of definitive answer as to what does it mean specifically. And it's like, you know, and Van Dyke couldn't answer specifically because it was more about images.
The encounter concluded with the departure of Van Dyke Parks from the Smile project. Though expectations for the album remained excessively high, and a buzz had developed amongst insiders privy to some of the material, the early months of 1967 saw the pressure on Brian and his as yet unfinished masterpiece begin to mount.
There began to develop this sense that Brian was on the verge of a masterwork beyond all masterworks. The only problem was the Beach Boys, and I think to a great extent Capitol Records, were having none of it. To the extent that they did sing the songs, they did it under pressure and gave a lot of duress to Brian along the way. The vocal sessions were very tense. And meanwhile, Brian, you know, is fraying internally.
I think the outside pressure of the Beach Boys then, and you know, all of a sudden saying, "Hey, we can't do. How can we do that song live?" You know, usually they could do all of the whole album, whatever songs they wanted. They couldn't do some of those songs live. I think he kept doing what he wanted to do, but he kept getting more and more pressure.
I think Brian probably got a little, I hate this word, but I have to use it, he got a little paranoid about what his next move was, you know? And I think he probably overthought it out, and Mike Love gets this horrible bad rap as trying to sabotage the Smile album. If you listen to the existing recordings of what was recorded for Smile, the band worked so hard with Brian to make this happen. But I just know Brian was, you know, very tense, and it wasn't the Brian that I'd worked with, you know. I just think his success was so big, he might have just been thinking, well, how am I going to do this?
Further problems surfaced in the form of an untimely lawsuit between Capitol Records and the Beach Boys over contracts and royalties. As the dispute rumbled through the courts, Brian was compelled to relocate to studios that would not be on the Capitol dollar. A prospective release date for Smile drifted further and further over the horizon of 1967, as Brian, buffeted by the various pressures and competing interests swirling around him, struggled to complete the album. When the new sound finally arrived in the summer, it was not from the bright skies of California, but the drizzly streets of Liverpool. The Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band had given rock and roll its watershed moment, and Brian Wilson capitulated, finally abandoning his grand vision and consigning Smile to the mythical realm of music's great lost work.
Let's forget about selling stuff. Just think of it as pure